Now there arose a king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. With these few words, the plight, the future of the children of Israel took a real dramatic change. From the time that the Israelites had first come down to the land of Egypt, back during the times of their forefathers when Joseph brought his brothers down to the land, they came down during a time of famine. And because of God's foresight and God's providence, He had provided for them. And they came down to the land of Egypt, and they settled into the land of Goshen, which was the best part of the land of Egypt. And because God's hand was with them, and because Joseph was over the land, he was second in command only to Pharaoh above him, the children of Israel prospered in the land of Egypt. They multiplied greatly, so much so that they filled the land. God was with them. Yet, as we just mentioned, there arose a time in which a new king came into power who did not remember the deeds, the good deeds of Joseph. And he looked out and he saw that because the Israelites had continued to increase, he said, these people are a threat. These people could cause us problems. This great horde of people who live in our land, if some enemy were to come in and they were to side with them, man, we'd be in for it. And so what they decided to do was they made them slaves. They made them slaves, and they put harsh, very harsh, tasks and burdens upon them. And the harder they pressed against them, the more that they put against them, the more they grew, the more they multiplied. So they had to come up with a different plan. So what they decided to do was, Pharaoh said, well, here's what we'll do. If any of the children are born and they're boys, we'll just kill them. That didn't work either. At least not to the full degree. There were some that survived that. One particular one that survived that was of the house of Levi. A baby that was born to the house of Amram and Jochebed. When this particular child was born, Jochebed knew that he was a fine child. And by the way, every mother who looks upon their child thinks that their child is a fine child. She saw that he was a fine child. And so she hid him. For 3 months she hid him. As long as she thought possible. But then she knew she could no longer hide him, so she made a ark, a basket of bulrushes, something that would float. And she put the child in the Nile, in the river. She didn't leave him alone. She left his sister out there to watch over him, to see what would become of him. Over whatever amount of time that there was, the child was out there, and the daughter of Pharaoh came down to the river to bathe. And she saw it, and she had her servants go over and get the basket and brought it to her. And inside the basket was a baby crying. And she had compassion for the baby. But she knew right away that it was one of the Israelites' babies. And the sister of the child came over and said, should I call a nurse for the child? Yes, go call a nurse. You want to guess who she went and got? It was Mom. Mom came, and the daughter of Pharaoh said, nurse the child, and I will pay you your wages. So she takes the child, she nurses the child, and then brings the child back at an appointed time, where this particular child was then from that time forward instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptian, and he was mighty in words and deeds, and he was raised up as he was a grandson of Pharaoh, of royalty. This boy's name, as we all know by now, is Moses. Moses continued to dwell in the house of Pharaoh for quite a few more years. About the time that he was 40 years old, Stephen tells us over in the book of Acts chapter 7, he looks out and he sees the plight of his people. You see, Moses was instructed and taught that his true people, where he came from, was the Israelites. And he looked out upon his own people and he realized that they were being afflicted, they were being persecuted, they were being mistreated. And one day he was out there and he saw one of his brethren, one of the Israelites, being mistreated by an Egyptian. And it says that he stood up for him to the point that he looked this way and that way, and there was nobody around, no one looking. And so he struck down the Egyptian, he killed the Egyptian, and he buried him in the sand. Later on, he went back out and he saw two Israelites fighting. And he told the one that was wrong and the other, "What are you doing?" Obviously, I'm paraphrasing. "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, who made you a judge over us? Who made you a ruler over us? You going to treat me like you did the Egyptian? You going to kill me like him?" And Moses figured, oh, it's not a secret. People know. Pharaoh knew. Pharaoh wanted to kill Moses then. So Moses left. Moses left and he went to the land of Midian. And there he dwelt with a man by the name of Reuel or Jethro, who was the priest of Midian, who gave Moses one of his daughters. I believe he had 7 of them. He gave him one of his daughters as his wife, Zipporah. And he felt that it was good and right to dwell with Jethro. That one's easier than the other one. Jethro for another approximately 40 years. And it's at this time that we pick up the story that Brother Wayne led us in a reading of the beginning this evening. You see, Moses had taken the flocks of Jethro, and he was in the land of wilderness of Midian, and he had taken them over, I believe it says, to the west side, close to Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. And there he had the flocks there. But he saw something unusual there. What he saw there was a bush that was burning. Out in the middle of the wilderness, a bush was burning, and yet the bush did not burn up. It continued to burn. And so he says, I'm going to go over and see what's happening here. What would cause this to happen? And so he goes over, and the Lord calls out to him from the bush and says, "Moses, Moses." And Moses said, "Here I am." And God said, "Do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." He goes on to talk to Moses. He says, "I am the God of your father. I'm the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob." Moses, upon hearing this, hid his face. He was scared because he was in the presence of God. God said, "I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good land and a broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, come, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." You see, up until that point, I imagine Moses was going, right on, right on, right on. Right? "Come and I will send you." Whoa, 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 whoa. He says, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" But God said, verse 12 of Exodus 3, "But I will be with you. And this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have been brought out, or when you bring out the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain." But what if I go to the people and I tell them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? Who is it that sent you? Who is it that gave you authority to come to us? What's his name? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say to this people of Israel, I am, has sent me to you. God also told Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Go and get all the people and gather them together, all the elders of the people. Gather them together. And then once you've done that, then you're going to go to Pharaoh and you're going to tell Pharaoh, let my people go into the wilderness, 3 days' journey, and there they will offer up sacrifices to me. But Moses, he's not going to want to let you go. I know Pharaoh, he is not going to let you go unless he sees my mighty deeds and my mighty wonders. And then when he sees that, then he will let you go, and you'll go out and you'll ask for presents from the Egyptians, and they'll give it to you, and then you can go. Moses, though, says, what if they won't listen to me? What if they won't believe me? What is that in your hand, Moses? It's a staff. Throw it on the ground. Moses throws it on the ground, and the staff becomes a serpent, a snake. And then he says something that would have been very difficult for me to do. He said, grab it by the tail. And he grabbed it by the tail, and it became a staff again. If they won't believe you, show them this. Put your hand inside your cloak, inside your clothes. Pull it out. Put it in. It's leprous. Put it back in. Pull it out. It's well. If they won't believe the first, do the second. And if they won't believe the first and they won't believe the second, take some water out of the Nile, pour it on the ground, and it'll become blood. But Lord, you know that I've never been able to speak very well. Not in the past, not now. I'm just not a good speaker. Who is it that makes your tongue? Who is it that gives you the words? Is it not me? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth, and teach you what you shall speak. O my Lord, please send someone else. Moses was like us in a lot of ways, wasn't he? Please send someone else. At that, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. And he said, is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he is coming to meet you. And when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him. And take in your hand this staff with which you shall do the signs. At this point, Moses has nothing else to say. So he goes to his father-in-law and says, it's time for me to go. The call of Moses. Moses and the burning bush. It's an account, it's an event in history in the Old Testament that we all should know, and if we don't know, we should study more. It's one that we should have known from the very beginning. From a child, we remember how that the bush was burning in the wilderness and it wasn't stopping. And what it was is it was the power of God appearing to Moses to call him because he had something for Moses to do. Good evening, by the way. Welcome. I'm glad that you're here. And I hope and pray that what we're going to study this evening will be a benefit to you. That was the introduction. But my lesson's no longer than the introduction, so don't get too scared, okay? What is it that we can learn from the call of Moses? Well, there's a few things, I'm sure, and a lot more than what we're going to talk about. Number one, Moses had a big task, didn't he? I mean, he had a big task. God said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. For I know their sorrow, so I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians. Come therefore now, and I will send you to go to Pharaoh. I want you to think about what Moses had in front of him. Moses had to go back to a land where he was a murderer. He had killed an Egyptian. But when he got back to the land, the first thing that he had to do was go and convince a great throng of people that God sent him to them to lead them. This same group of people, by the way, that Stephen tells us over in Acts chapter 7, that rejected him the first time when he tried to lead them. So now he's got to go back and try it again. Then once he does that, then he's got to go before one of, if not the most powerful physical ruler on earth at that particular time, and say, you need to let this people that you're using as slaves and got all this quote-unquote free labor, you need to let them go so that they can worship God. Doesn't sound like a real easy task, does it? Sounds like a pretty big job, doesn't it? But God said, I choose you. You know what? We've got a big job too. Now, we're not going to lead a nation. We're not going to lead a nation out of slavery. That's not our job. Okay? But God has given us some tasks that we seem, at least at times, seems to be very big in our sight, doesn't it? Some things that would be very difficult for us to do. And sometimes we may feel, just like Moses did, that we're not up to the task. There's too much at stake, though, for us just not to give it, to work at it, to do it. I want you to look at some of the tasks that God has given us. Big task. When you look out and you think about our society today, I think probably one of the biggest words that would describe how we feel about our society and about everything that's going on is a 4-letter word called fear. We're scared. We're scared of where our nation is heading. We're scared of what this nation is going to look like and what we may have to face in the next few years, but more importantly, what our children are going to have to face and what our grandchildren, we're just scared. So what do? Do we crawl up in a ball and just give up? No, we can't do that. We can't do that. So how do we change it? How can we change the people in the community of Medina? How can we change the people in Gibson County? How can we change the people in West Tennessee? How can we change the people in Tennessee? How can we change the people of our nation? Dare we even think that we can change our nation? And the answer is we have to start with one place, and that's in the home. It must start in the home. It must start with parents teaching children. Fathers, he says, as soon as I show it to you. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. That's where it starts, in the home. Parents, you want to know how God had planned for the children of Israel to have their children educated? Read Psalm 78. And in Psalm 78, you will not see that he says, send them to the synagogues. You'll not say, send them to the Jewish schools. He says, fathers will teach their children so that that generation will know God. You want your child to learn? You've got to start with yourself. They're your responsibility. Fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. That's Other translation of that same verse. It's our responsibility as parents to teach them. Now, can they get other influences, other instruction? Yes, obviously so. But it starts, it's most effective in the home. That's a big task. But we can't shirk our responsibility and say, well, give it to somebody else, let them do it. It's going to require a lot of time, a lot of effort. But it's our job. How about this one? You know, our society and culture is obviously not seeking the things of God. It's obvious to us. It has become a society that more than ever seems to fit what Isaiah said in Isaiah 5 and verse 20, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Everything's opposite. It's opposite day, right? Isn't it interesting that we think we live in the worst times, and yet Isaiah said this, that would be 2,700 or so years ago? People are people. Woe to those who call good evil and evil good. What it seems like that's happening in our society everywhere, right? And you know what the writer of Proverbs says? He says, those who forsake the law, those who don't want to keep the law, they praise the wicked. But guess what those who are supposed to love the law do? Those who keep the law strive against them. In other words, they stand up. They stand up for what is right. Our contention is not one of a physical nature. It is not. It is one of an intellectual and spiritual nature. And we must stand up against the wickedness that rejects the holy teachings of God. But do you know where that starts? It starts with me. And I don't mean Ben. I mean it starts with each one of us. We each must first reject those same things. I must not only know that it's wicked, I must reject it in my life. And that's hard to do. That's hard to do. But that's where it must start. Before we can stand up for what's right in front of others, we must stand up for what's right inside. Standing up for what's right has always been difficult. In Mark chapter 11, verses 15 through 18, Jesus came to the temple. And when he came to the temple, they were using it as a place of merchandise. A den of robbers, he calls it. You know what he did? He ran them out. You know how popular that was among the Jews? Among the leaders? It says there in Mark 11, verses 15 through 18, that they sought a way. They were seeking to destroy him. It wasn't popular. They didn't like it when someone stood up for what was right. They're not going to like it today either. The job may not be easy. The task may not be easy, but it's still our task. How about teaching the gospel? That's a big task, isn't it? You remember what Jesus said? He said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Pray earnestly then to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. There's not enough of us going out and teaching and preaching the gospel. And I don't mean as a pulpit preacher. I mean enough of us just going out and spreading the truth. We need to do it. And we ought to pray earnestly that God will send more. By the way, do you fail like I do in not praying for that enough? I don't. I should, and I hopefully will. Do we pray enough for that? It's a big task, but there is a whole world out there that needs it. You know, the current pandemic has caused a lot more damage than just the physical sicknesses, physical losses, the physical deaths that are recorded and that are just splattered across everything that we see. It's caused a lot more damage than that. The number of Christians, I'm not talking about people, in general. The number of Christians that are now battling sadness, that are battling spiritual and emotional depression, that are battling spiritual complacency, or that have simply lost their faith is increasing daily. Every local congregation in this country, including the one in Medina, is having to deal with it. How do we address it? How do we combat it? Well, there's a verse in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 14 that will help us. It's a verse that we probably should spend a whole lesson on, but I've already kept you long enough for a whole lesson, so we're not going to do that. But I want you to look at it. He says, this is Paul encouraging the Thessalonians here, and we urge you, brothers, admonish the idle. That word admonish is also translated in other translations as warn. That word idle is also translated in other ones as unruly. It comes from a Greek word that is actually a military term, which means someone who is not stepping in line, like a band guy, right? He's not in line. He's out of line. Whoop, get back in line, right? Warn him. Admonish him. We have a duty to warn those that are not walking in line. Warn them. Are we to be kind and gentle? Yes. But we must warn. We must warn. Admonish the idle. Encourage the faint-hearted. The faint-hearted are simply those who are discouraged. You know what you learn over time? Some people get more discouraged than others. They're just more apt to get more discouraged. Some people are. Some people are happy folks just about no matter what you do to them. Unfortunately, they're fewer. They're fewer. But there are some that are just happy all the time. They find ways to be happy. And you know who those ought to be? They ought to be Christians. But there are some who are just more apt to be faint-hearted and discouraged. And there's a lot of things out there to be discouraged about. But you know what? There were a lot of things to be discouraged about in the first century. That's why Paul said, encourage them. Encourage the faint-hearted. Help the weak. Help the weak. Who is the weak? Or who are the weak? I don't know which one's right grammatically, but whatever. Who are the weak? Well, it's specifically talking about those who are spiritually weak. And it could be the spiritual weakness was due to a specific matter that happened in their life, maybe a specific temptation, maybe a specific trial that they're having to go through. Whatever it is, they were weak. And you know what it seems to me? That every one of us is weak in a certain area. And so when he says help the weak, he's in a lot of ways saying help everybody in the areas that they need help with. That word help has reference to clinging to, holding fast to something or someone that you are devoted to. It doesn't rule out discipline, but it says you hang on and you don't let go. Is that how we help the weak? We're not going to let them go. Be patient with them all. In all of these situations, it's easy to give up. Whether you're the one being helped or the helper, it's easy to give up. And so he simply says, be patient with them all. Be long-suffering, endure. It's not a one-time event, but something that you're going to have to continue to do. It's an attitude that you have toward others. Admonish the idle. Encourage the faint-hearted. Help the weak. Be patient with them all. Moses had a big task. We have a big task. These are just a few of them. But it can be done. You know what else? God saw the afflictions of Israel. Notice how many times he told Moses, I have seen the affliction of my people. I have heard their cries. I know what they're going through. And so he sent Moses. You know what? God has always seen the sufferings of His people. You thought about what He talks to the churches in Asia about in the book of Revelation? Look at what He says there to the church in Ephesus. I know you are enduring patiently and bearing up for my name's sake, and you have not grown weary. I know that, He says. God sees, God knows. What about the church in Smyrna? I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich, spiritually speaking. And the slander of those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. I know what you're going through. God knows. How about the church in Pergamum? I know where you dwell, where Satan's throne is. In other words, I know what kind of environment you're having to live in. I know. The church in Thyatira, I know your works, your love and faith and service and patient endurance, and that your latter works exceed the first. I know, he says. And then finally, the church in Philadelphia, because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial. God saw what they were going through. God knew their afflictions. God knew their trials. And you know what else? He knows ours too. He knows what we're going through today. He knows what we've gone through the past week. He knows what we've gone through the past year. He knows. He cares. Read 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 10 through 17. God knows the sufferings that we're going through, but He also says we're going to have to suffer sometimes. But He also tells us over in chapter 5, cast all your anxieties and your cares upon Him. Why? Because He cares for you. God knows. God sees. God cares. You know another lesson you learn from Moses? One of the most stark lessons that I get from this every time is that God says, nope, I won't take the excuses. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? I'm a nobody. No, I won't take that one. What if they ask me by what authority I came? Who sent me? No, He's not going to take that one either. He gave him the answer to that one too. What if they won't believe me? No, gave him something for that one. That one's not going to work. I just can't speak. I'm no good at public speaking. Nope, that one won't work. Then would you just send somebody else? Nope. Do you think ours will work then? I just don't have enough time to do all that. I can't do all that. I don't have enough time. I'm not smart enough. No, I don't buy that one of any of you. Not of any of you. That's me speaking. But you know what God is saying? No, I don't buy that of any of you. If we're smart enough to understand the gospel plan to obey it, we can spread it. I just can't speak very well. Okay, write it down. Write it down. Someone else is better at that than I am. Guess what? There's always going to be somebody better than you are at something. That's okay. He's not asking us to be the best at necessarily anything. He's asking us to do what we can. When He looks at excuses, then I think of the one-talent man. I knew that you were a hard man, so I went and I took the talent and I hid it in the earth, and here it is. Sorry to do the microphone. Here it is. It's back to you. You knew that I was a hard man? Then why didn't you at least take it and get interest for it? You know what He's saying? No, excuses won't work. Excuses won't work. We must do what we can. How about this one? I like this one a lot, actually. There in chapter 4 and verse 1, Moses answered, "But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, 'The Lord did not appear to you.' The Lord said to him, 'What is that in your hand?' 'A staff.'" Remember, we talked about this just a minute ago. The snake, not grabbing the tail and all that. Right? You know what God said? God said, "Whatever you got, I'll use it." Whatever you got, I'll use it. The same thing is true for us today, isn't it? I don't understand music the way Keith understands music, so I can't sing. Guess what? Yeah, I can. It may be off key, it may be too loud, it may be too fast, it may be too slow. Guess what? I can still sing. I don't have this as though God can use what you have. You know what he says in Romans? "Having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. If prophecy in proportion to our faith, if service in our serving," remember, serve and share and save through Christ. "If service in our serving, the one who teaches in his teaching, the one who exhorts in his exhortation, the one who contributes in generosity, the one who leads with zeal, the one who does acts of mercy with cheerfulness." He says, use what you've got. Use what you've got, because God can use it. Next time you're thinking, "I can't do that. That's not something I can do." Just think of what God said. What is that in your hand? What have you got? Then use that. And by the way, whatever we have, we should seek to increase and improve it. Right? We should seek to increase and improve it. One last application, and I appreciate your patience. When Moses called for him, the final excuse was that he said, "Lord, can you please just send someone else?" And I've told you this before. I do a lot of application to my growing up and to my parents and things like that, and Mom will listen to me, and I've told her hi before, but I'll do it again. Hi, Mom. And I can just hear my dad saying to me, "Dad, can't you just get Sean to do that?" Sean is my younger brother, by the way. And I can just see him getting red in the face and saying, "I told you to do it. I told you to do it," right? But God got angry, but he also knew that Moses needed some help. He said, "Is that not Aaron, your brother? He's going to come out and meet you, and he's going to be glad to see you. And y'all are going to go. And you're going to tell him what to say. And y'all are going to go do my job for me." God sent Moses someone to help him. You know what? God has sent us a bunch of helpers too. Every one of you. Our brothers and sisters in Christ were given to us by God as our helpers. When the load is heavy, when the burden is tough, you don't have to go it alone. We got others to help us. Let us support one another. Let us provoke one another to love and to good works. We have a big task ahead of us. Every Christian of all time has. We're no different. Sometimes, again, we tend to do the, oh, woe is me. We're worse, it's worse off than it ever was. Every Christian of every time has. Ours may come in a different form. They had trials too. But we have those to help us. God has provided us with everything that we need to accomplish His purpose and to make it to that goal of heaven. So the question is, have you started your journey? If you haven't, why not let us help you this evening? If you need to make your life right with God, do so tonight while you have the time and opportunity. If you've done that and there's something in your life that's not right and you need to make a change, you need the help of the brethren here, we'd love to help you. Whatever we can do to help you, won't you come while we stand and while we sing?